summer edition. So we were saying, wow, new anniversary. Has the whole bloody game's changed once again.
Yeah.
Is it still playable, Dre? I forgot to sub last night. I don't think I'm gonna actually resub. It is what it is,
Look, I think the big thing for me with while this expansion has just been the whole idea was to play with friends, and it's become a solo grind.
Dude, yeah, that's I think the main thing you and I have been, I guess I wouldn't say complaining about, but kind of murmuring every time we do get invested in World of Warcraft. Funny enough, every expansion the same thing happens. We get hyped up, all the bras are together, we're all there in the lobby on launch day, and then suddenly we're all adventuring in Azeroth on our own, and I think that kind of leads into the rest of the discussion and kind of where games are going at the moment, specifically looking at kind of the social experience of some games. And I think something that you'll touch on a bit heavily more on is obviously the comparison between AAAs, indies, and just the kind of corporate requirement to make money before making something fun for us to play, right? I think that was a big one that we've been touching on. I think you can delve a little bit deep into that, obviously, with your passion for Smash Bros. And the discussion we've had over the years with regards to Nintendo and how they've treated that game, and obviously World of Warcraft and the many more AAAs that have been bugging us over the years.
Yeah, I think thank you for giving a quick overview of the things we want to chat about today. But first and foremost, welcome to the new podcasting location.
Yeah, James, shout out to you. Yeah, I know you wanted a bit more chilled environment, but hey, that's always been the dream. Yeah, we just had to slowly progress,
Yeah, so the whole idea that Luca had was that it's sort of like, sit down on the couch and informal talk crap with your mates type of setup. So we still got these desk stand mics, which is something we may consider moving into something that clips onto, the side of the couch or something, just to make it a little bit more casual. We tried the clip-on mic approach, but that didn't work at all.
Yeah, those things just have a crazy capture range, right? But shout out to Rode. I mean, flip, the mic equipment's been amazing.
Yeah, no, the equipment's been great. So we're very happy with it. We still fine-tuning, so any feedback's fantastic. But yeah, back to what you said. I think a big aspect for us with gaming in general is the social aspect. And I'm one of those guys that basically when I get on gaming, it's either to play a good story, play addictive gameplay, and at the top of the list is to play games with friends. Shout out to the FGC. I mean, fighting games still, for me, is the most fun way that you can play games with your friends. Whether or not Smash Brothers is truly an FGC game is open for debate. But it has a similar vibe. I mean, there's very few grassroots communities as strong and as resilient as the Smash community.
Yeah, I think touching on that, I think we'll dive into that. Definitely a big part of the discussion is more so that point where we get to difficulty in games and how that brings you back to play more, to get better. Finding that like very sweet balance between being able to jump in, obviously be able to feel like you're actually playing the game, and then really breaching into that kind of high tier, breaking the ceiling, seeing how far a game can really go. That brings you back and wants or makes you want to play the game more, to get better and unlock kind of new features that you never even realized were there. And I think fighting games have done that very well. Of course, there's a plethora of fighting games which are absolutely terrible. Of course, we're not going to say every fighting game is perfect. But if anything, like you said, it's the one genre that the AAAs, the big dogs, are still in it for that. And that specifically is high-tier competitive gameplay while slowly integrating a new casual audience. They've definitely got it down the best.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think the thing that's so nice about fighting games is the fact that it's very similar to playing an instrument. You start playing a song, and in the beginning, you barely get to play all the notes, right? You do segments correctly, and then after repetition for weeks, if not months, you eventually can play the song perfectly. And how combos and movement and mechanics in a lot of these fighting games work, it's very, very similar. Also, when it comes to the muscle memory. And then it becomes exponentially more fun to play the game. For me with Smash, I never put in the time. Like I struggle with the grindy stuff, so to call going to the lab and just practicing that stuff over and over. I'm more of the gamer that likes to learn through, actually playing the game. But if you really, especially with fighting games, if you really want to take your game to that next level, that's sort of like a requirement. But I guess the same could be said for, shooters and other games where, you do the aimbot training, or what's it called?
Yeah, I would say, look, aim training in shooters, I would say fighting games, before I guess we get too deep into a specific genre, but when you're comparing fighting games to the others, I think that's the one that requires the most study. If you're going to compare it from FPS, you can genuinely go onto a TDM server and use that as your aim training, your movement training, just fragging out as much as you can. You're not caring about your AD, your KD. It's just getting that cursor onto your opponent, holding down that trigger, making sure that kind of, aim transition is strong, your flicks, obviously your slow swipes and all of that. That just comes through practice, no matter what scenario you're in. But fighting games, you have to understand frames. You have to understand what your opponent's character can do depending on what buttons you're pressing, if they block, if they don't block, if you're converting through specials. What are the tools on the table if you are connecting on your opponent?
Advantage state, disadvantage state,
exactly,
neutral,
and that takes study.
all that.
And I think, I guess before we dive into it too deeply, a topic that we've kind of, well, not a topic, but rather an introductory segment to the Tryhard podcast, almost what we wanted to do on episode 1, and we always made that joke that we have like 2 episodes on the back burner that just disappeared. But I think the main question that I think a lot of people would have maybe watching the podcast is, who the hell are these two? And how can they expect us to listen to them and accept their opinions as remotely correct? So I think just to give them a little bit of an idea of kind of our background when it comes to games, obviously specifically, but also in our individual cases from a personal upbringing back in the day. When did we start playing games, and what industries have we found ourselves playing in that kind of lead back to the passion of gaming and entertainment? Dive in there.
Well, so, I mean,
first and foremost, we'll start with you. If you're going to jump into that, Dre, tell us a little bit about yourself, dude.
to call a spade, don't listen to me. There's no credentials. No, look, so I think, the part of the reason for this podcast is that we've got a burning passion for gaming. It's something that we've done degeneratively and constructively over, the span of our lives.
In a part of the world that you wouldn't really expect, I guess, right?
No. So a big goal for us is to do this in a way that creates content, gives back to the community, and gives insight to, the things we've learned over a lifetime of gaming. And, I guess that goes back to our credentials and why it might or might not be worth listening to us. Is, we both 90s kids. So, I was born late 80s. I think Luca was born start of the 90s.
91.
So we grew up, sort of like with the gaming industry. I still remember getting my first SNES, then the N64, then the GameCube. I actually had a Sega in there as well, playing the Batman games. Lots of 2D platformers. Eventually got a PlayStation 2. I never really was an Xbox guy, but played a lot of Halo co-op with my friends. That was amazing couch
Before
co-op.
you get too far, take us back to that story that you always told me about how you learned English.
Okay, no, we'll get there. Okay, so before we jump all over the place, just gonna finish up with sort of like the console gaming history, and then I'll revert back to that. But basically,
forward to back, bro.
Forward to back. But basically, big Nintendo guy, got into the PlayStations later, and also a big time PC gamer. And yeah, as Luca mentioned anecdotally, well, not anecdotally, just historically, how I learned English. So English is actually my third language. Learned Afrikaans and Dutch first, grew up in Holland, and I flat out refused to learn English. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. Like a little kid throwing a tantrum. I was not interested. But, my father, being as smart as he was, he was like, okay, well, here's the Nintendo 64. Here's Mario 64. This little, rug destroying kid is, wants to get all 120 stars. So he bought me one of those. Back then, game guides were actually printed booklets.
I remember used to literally print them for like Final Fantasy guides and walkthroughs for my friend at school. I used to sell guides, but anyway.
Holy crap, early hustler. So he got me the game guide for Mario 64, and it was in English. So essentially, in the course of like 4 to 6 weeks, I learned to speak English just because of reading the Mario 64 game guide.
Smart dad.
Yeah, I still remember I was on 119 stars. I needed the last star to unlock Yoshi. And the last star in the game that was waiting for me was getting 100 coins on Rainbow Ride. If that's what it's called, the one up in the sky where you're on all the carpets. And I remember getting to 99 coins and then dying before getting the 100th coin. And I was distraught. I'm still carrying the emotional trauma from that. But eventually managed to get it. One of my earliest and favorite gaming memories. And yeah, since then, I've basically played a lot of Smash. It's still my favorite game. I mean, my wife and I play it quite regularly, or used to. Since moving into the new place and with the baby, gaming time together has been much more limited. And really was a big Dota and, played pretty much all the popular multiplayer games, World of Warcraft, the shooters, COD, Apex Legends, most of the AAA titles, and then especially personal favorite is just good story games. The God of War, 2018, one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, I think we held that in high regard, considering that it was such a huge kind of step away from what we were experiencing at that stage. 2018, that kind of linear RPG focusing on storytelling was something that we missed a lot of, I think, and that kind of broke the mold. And I feel set the expectations not high in the negative sense, but it set our expectations on, hey, let's go back to that experience. Like, I just want to experience a story, have something that flows. It doesn't distract me for 20 hours on side quests. I'd even forget why I even started playing this game in the first place. I think they really set a new standard, which I feel, of course, no game has really been able to reach that yet. Maybe one or two has, I'm forgetting, but I think that just stood out, obviously, and we want more of that. I think we'll touch on it just now, as the idea of repetition in games nowadays, and that leads back to fighting games and how they've done so well to make a repetitive genre still so fun. But then there's other games that we're playing, World of Warcraft. We love the game, we hate the game, but it always gets to that hate word, harsh, but it always comes to fruition when you start feeling that repetition kick in, where you're only progressing because of the time you put in. You're not actually getting better at anything, for argument's sake.
Yeah, so look, I think through the course of this, you're going to learn what our tastes are. I'm a big proponent of social games, co-op games. Like It Takes Two was one of my favorite gaming memories in the last while, playing that with my wife. Anything you can play with friends where it can be linear, but there's a start and an end to it. Not just mindlessly doing the same thing over, like playing Dota, like playing
Call of Duty, I mean, yeah.
Those are two very different things. So yeah, and look, I think there's three components to gaming. It's the story, it's the social, and always the king is gameplay. That's, in my opinion, why Nintendo games hold up so well, is because of the gameplay. You need to have good gameplay for the other things to be able to really shine. And yeah, I think, from my end, my goal is to find those games that are worth your time. We have got a vast experience of gaming behind us, and to do the dirty work, to go through the games that may or may not be worth it, to break that mold of just playing the same thing over and over again, and trying out the new things and letting the audience, what is worth your time, because we enjoyed it.
We'll spend our money so you don't have to. That's the goal.
Yeah,
kind of.
So hopefully,
hopefully it's all money well spent, right? We'll be positive.
That depends on our consistency.
Yeah, and if the games are shit or not.
No, exactly.
Yeah, I guess, jumping in there from my end there, we won't take too much time. Similar case, born in South Africa. Well, you weren't born in South Africa, but born here, moved overseas when I was very young. So before I hit my first birthday, myself, my father and mom, we moved to Sardinia. So it's just a little island off the coast of Italy, considered part of the south, I guess. That's where my father's family is based. Grew up there till I was about 6-7 years old, and my introduction to gaming was in the little town of BT, very small stone, pretty much still stuck in the Stone Age in some cases, but really beautiful, really classic, and just so much history. But a little little corner cafe on the main square. Had a little arcade and, your Metal Slugs, your old OG Street Fighters. So there's a little photo of me. I'll overlay it.
King of Fighters.
KOF, Tekken, or not Tekken. No, that was too early for Tekken. But I already had my taste of games back then. And because there wasn't much to do in the town, I was literally school, creche, straight to the arcade. And my dad was very chilled. It's control. Your little boy is just sitting there smashing buttons all afternoon. Moved back to South Africa. It was 96, 97, and spent a lot of my time living with my older brother at that stage, like early years of primary school, and he was on the PlayStation. So he already had the PS1, watching him play games I probably shouldn't have, your Resident Evils, your Metal Gears, and just fell in love with the storytelling of games, completely being enveloped into a character. I still think I'm Solid Snake sometimes. I wake up and I'm like, pretty sure my wife thinks I am Solid Snake. No, she thinks that I think I'm Solid Snake. But I think that's just those attachments. And like we said, it's those characters in some ways kind of shaped us into who we are today. And that's or at least that's where my passion for games stemmed from. Spending a lot of time with my older brother, my memories, and obviously just falling in love with these characters. And then into high school, still a console boy. Obviously linked up with a few homies who were already on PC. They were playing like Dota 2, or Dota rather, back then on the Twilight servers. We had like little kind of free servers that you could play on, as well as Battlefield 2. So they were very much into Battlefield 2 on the local Augusta servers. So I was like, Mom, I need a computer, please. So luckily at that stage, she hooked me up. Back then, you could spend 10K and you're like rocking with like one of the best setups possible, bro.
10K, you probably had a spaceship.
Yeah, you were cooking back then, bro. I was like, rich boy. It's like nowadays, 10K is buying you a low-end CPU.
Yeah, basically.
It's ridiculous. So obviously, Battlefield 2, played that for a year, Dota, and then Call of Duty Pro or Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare came out in 2007, and that's when the deep end was found, the black hole. Played that competitively on the local Telkom circuits. My proudest gaming achievement stemming from that period, obviously winning the Telkom Championship in 2010, coming second in 2011, still a heartbreaker, and then winning again in 2012. Also won the Intel Championship locally when we had one of those. And that was really awesome, obviously captaining Bravado Gaming in South Africa. But at that point, 2013, was when I woke up and just realized the industry at that phase was just nowhere near being valuable enough as an athlete. Can you believe gamers call themselves athletes nowadays? To actually earn a living doing that. So took my winnings, started my own agency the following year in 2014 called Arena, or Online Arena. Hosted a few tournaments, probably like 200 within like a 4-year period. And that included events like the Electronic Sports World Cup qualifiers for Counter-Strike. So sending teams overseas, and that was really my passion, still is, kind of getting South Africa and Africa a little bit more connected to the global scene, the global audience, and kind of keeping up to their level, sending players overseas and giving them the chance to experience what I really wanted to, with the end goal of eventually getting back into the industry as a player. Obviously that never happened. Esports wise, I actually ended up at Red Bull from 2017 to mid 2023. I started the gaming department then. That was where kind of like fighting games in South Africa really started to wake up. I had a passion for fighting games after meeting Jabi Mabuza in 2016 and just seeing how it was such a passionate group of players that just loved their game and could come back and play and just wanted to spend time together and learn, and that really took me back to the early COD days where homies just wanted that glory of being the best. And I think the whole esports side of things and monetary value and always wanting to play for a big prize, another big tournament, kind of tainted that a little bit. So that's where fighting games kind of just had that sense of community. It was always there, and it still is there today. Even though they're playing for the big prizes now, you still feel like these are just a bunch of bras, a bunch of gamers competing to be the best, And obviously Red Bull Hit the Streets came, we brought that to life, and then eventually Red Bull Kumite brought that to South Africa. So I would say, the gaming achievement being Call of Duty locally, being a national champion twice with my team. I was honestly so proud of that. Still hold on to that quite dearly. And then from a more, if you want to say, professional side, was being an event manager at Red Bull and bringing Red Bull Kumite, to South Africa, the first world final event where, superstars essentially in our frame of mind came to our country, the Taquitos, the Big Birds, the Angry Birds, the Oil Kings, the Problem X's, I'm forgetting amazing players, the High Doms, Gachikun, these guys here in South Africa playing for the big bucks, you know, and our local players all getting to have a taste of that level of competition. So
And then Sequele winning the combo contest.
the people's champ, Jabi beating Tokido, one of the 5 gods of Japanese Street
That was
Fighter.
so hype.
Oh, dude, I mean, I will overlay that moment where you and I are just like losing our minds. Like, he's got the camera trying to control himself, like keeping the camera on me. Yeah, you can rewatch that today and still be like, don't cry, bro. So, yeah, I guess that's like just a little bit of a background on us and kind of where we find ourselves today. I think Dre and I, we've had I said last time, we've had a personal growth year, you know, a little bit of introspection the last year and really realize what we want to do. We love games. We love making videos. So let's find a way to make that something that we can do every day and bring that to you guys as entertainment, but also learn a lot about the industry through who we get to talk to, what topics we cover, and obviously our interaction with you guys, you know, very important.
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, my firm belief when it comes to content is make something that you want to watch. So, you know, our main goal is to always keep it interesting and to not really go that deep on one game or one specific genre. We may spend, you know, a few episodes on a certain game, but you know, if we just doing Warcraft videos or just doing COD videos,
This is not a World of Warcraft podcast, promise.
no, it's gonna get boring for us, and by
And if we
extent,
feel like
it's gonna
we-
show in the video.
And if we feel like there's an interesting topic that we want to cover, but we don't really know much about it, we'll get someone on the show who can ask the questions, you know. We'll make sure of that. Like we had Mornay and Mike with us talking about World of Warcraft, Ultra Sweats. You know, if we want to get someone here to talk about Counter-Strike, you got Travis down the road, you know. So we'll make sure we have the right people to talk about the right topic if we don't trust ourselves.
Yeah, and obviously, throughout this journey, you know, the main thing for us is to just consistently bring you guys content. So the podcast is going to be every 2 weeks. I know it's sort of been a rocky start. We've had some technical issues having to re-record stuff due to audio.
We learn as we go.
But we learn as we go, and obviously always open for feedback. We want to keep improving the product and make sure that you guys are looking forward to the next episode each time.
Amazing. Yeah, so I think we'll touch onto a topic that we've seen spoken about a lot recently. I think we saw it come from we were talking about this Pirate Software on YouTube, touching on obviously the lawsuit at the moment that's taking place in Japan between Nintendo and Pocket Pair. Nintendo obviously Pokemon, Pocket Pair being Palworld. One of the games that I degenerately spent too much time on at the beginning of the year, literally a few months after I got married.
Yeah,
Blessings to you, Chef.
He actually got married to Palworld.
Pretty much. I think that my wife would agree with you. So that's what happened for 2 months. A bunch of us were locked into that game, servers resetting, losing all progress, starting over and going for it. Starting over and over and over, all the hours farming the characters, figuring out the game, locations. And obviously the game did extremely well. We touch on, specifically this topic would be mechanics that have now taken them into a court case with Nintendo, being the way of catching a creature with a spherical object. But then looking at kind of what Palworld did, and why someone like Nintendo would want to stop them. Obviously, with Palworld, they've taken the things that worked, in our opinion, from Pokemon, from survival games like Ark, and just combined it together and made an awesome experience with a severely addictive game loop and repetitive mechanics that work and are fun. So yeah, I mean, touching on that from your experience, obviously, Nintendo, in your history books, high regard in terms of quality of game, low regard with how they handle their community and the industry. So touching on, obviously, repetition in games, mechanics in games, and tools like what Nintendo is about to patent. What is your opinion on big players taking moves like this in the industry?
Yeah, look, I think a big problem with games these days is just how massive of a corporate and money-making machine it's become. And a lot of these companies are doing things legally and from a patent point of view to just be punitive, right? So, like the main thing with Palworld and the reason why companies like Nintendo patent game mechanics is to basically just sue someone for money once they are successful enough using anything that can remotely be used in a court of law to say, hey, well, you copied our idea. It doesn't add anything to or value to the industry. It just stifles innovation, and it's the big players being greedy.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's see if they make a lot of money that we can just take from them.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously there needs to be a certain amount of protection for IP if you bring something unique to the world. But then in the same breath, patent the story, patent the characters, patent the ideas. For you to, I mean, it's the equivalent of EA patenting the idea that, okay, well, you can't use a character that kicks a ball, right? Like, I mean, come on. And that's the extent to what some of these companies are doing with, the game ideas or mechanics that they're patenting. A famous one is the Lord of the Rings one with the Nemesis system, which is amazing because each time you fight an enemy, the history of the fights gets brought up and it sort of evolves on that self. But I mean, how original of an idea is that, right? Like, I mean, that's sort of just a extension or a development of any kind of mechanic in a RPG where, the game changes based on what you've done in the game.
I mean, you could argue who was the first developer to put mini maps into their game. They could go back and just argue that we patent that,
So
no one can ever use mini maps again.
Yeah, so I have a massive problem with that because, look, I mean,
Just
the problem,
stifles
yeah,
creativity and adjustment of a good idea. It's like, cool, here's your patent of throwing a ball. Well, unpatent that, and someone can turn that and make it even better. Not a direct copy.
Well, look, the perfect example of that is Game Freak and Nintendo and how bad and lazy the Pokemon games have been. I mean, it is literally phoning it in every single time they release a new Pokemon game since the original Red, Yellow, and Blue. Some would argue the gen after that was still decent.
Oof, yeah, if we'll bring Dano, will have something to say about that and Crevo, because they believe that Silver and Gold were like peak of Pokemon, and that's when it just dipped.
Yeah, so even Arceus and the later ones, it's such low effort products. And for me, the thing that's frustrating with that is, and this is the one thing where a lot of these big AAA studios have got a game with mechanics and characters and almost a pseudo monopoly in their spaces, like Call of Duty, like Dota. Well, I mean, Dota, the MOBAs are probably a good example of where there's good competition with the league, or especially FIFA, where they're not being pushed at all to make a better product, and because the core element that they've got is so good and so addictive, we as players are just suckers because we want to scratch that itch for that gameplay. But there's so many fundamental issues with it that makes the product way worse than it could be.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is my single biggest frustration with gaming at the moment, and a big part of the reason why we should always support good independent games, indie developers. Like Valheim, like Palworld, like Hades, games like that where you can see the love, you can see the guys are really trying to make the game as good as it can be. To an extent, an example of where it's sort of like an in-between at the moment was CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk, where on release it was a corporately rushed game to make money. But now with the amount of time they've put into improving the game, it's probably one of the best games out there, period. I mean, Cyberpunk 2077 in its current state is a phenomenal gaming experience.
And I mean, on that point, that leads perfectly into the news that we got yesterday from an indie company, our friends at Path of Exile. Obviously, they've made the choice.
Sold for 800 million to Tencent. I mean, that's not really indie anymore.
It was, right? But it seems like the lead devs have decisive control over the business. And that's a really good idea. The guys who came in there with the original idea, they're still at the helm and they own that creative control over the game. And they've made that decision now to delay things to December. Obviously, at first, I mean, not the FOMO, but the hunger, the excitement to play the game, it's a bummer. But logically speaking, I feel like looking at, well, not logically, but just purely off observation, looking at the comments and the feedback to this, it's been very positive. Because I think as an industry of consumers in this niche, we've just become tired of buying and paying for half-finished games.
Beta testers.
Dude, literally. Like, that was a discussion with, wow, we're playing a game that's incomplete. We're figuring out where the incompleteness is, and then they're adding those things into the game at a later stage. By the time we're already over it. Like, I think of Cyberpunk, that's probably a game I would have loved to play. Now it's taking me months of motivation, of seeing the game improve. I still have to finish the other backlog of games that I have. I might only see Cyberpunk in like a year, but then I've missed out on that initial hype. And
I disagree with missing out on the hype. I think good single player story games hold up over time, no matter what.
or they're not me, but I feel like they missed out on it big time. The industry, they've definitely lost out on what their sales could have been and what that world could have been. Because, geez, like what they painted, the picture they painted was revolutionary. It was like GTA on steroids. That's what we were waiting for, what we were hoping for.
Yeah, look, I think especially when it comes to them, The Witcher 3 released also in a reasonably sorry state, and over time they made it into the game it was. So I think they're a kind of a unique studio in that sense. But yeah, I think back to the whole paid beta testers thing, I have a lot of respect for the Path of Exile team to delay the game and be transparent with it. And I think I speak here for most gamers that we'd rather a game be delayed and it be as good as it can be than having a rush product that really just breaks the hype and causes people to wait a long period of time to enjoy the game, if they even ever patch it and improve it. A lot of the games never get that treatment. And because, like I said earlier, some of these companies have a pseudo monopoly on certain games or game types, you don't really have a different option. I mean, hell, like...
Well, let's dive into that, because looking at World of Warcraft and now Call of Duty as another example, there's one big logo that's floating above both of those games, and they have a very, very skillful understanding, and it's funny because this came from a little clip I saw on Twitter of Asmon coming back into World of Warcraft. They have a very, very good understanding of how to market to addicts. That was the quote that came out of that clip, because how are we still playing these games every single year? I'm back in Call of Duty. I'm back in World of Warcraft. It's the exact same thing. Like,
there's been basically zero innovation in this space.
I love Call of Duty, but honestly, it's the same game. It looks exactly the same. You can't argue that it looks better and the graphics are so much better now that my PC needs to be doubled in power to be able to play the game. No, dude. I've got to... arguably there's a 50,000 Rand computer there sitting in my house that literally cannot get over 115, 120 frames at everything max performance, like config settings, getting deep with Freethy on YouTube, going deep. And I can't cap out farther than 120. And if I stream, I'm sitting at like 40, 50 frames. How is that possible? What are they doing? And that leads back to they just want to print cash.
Yeah, look, I think... there's a whole new speculation you can have about how in cohorts the gaming companies and the hardware developers are, because like you said, I mean, COD is essentially the exact same game it's been for the last 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many years.
It's like 20 years now.
And you now need essentially a server-based cloud computer that can send a rocket to the moon just to play it, right? Which is, I don't understand it.
I mean, I make the argument sometimes. You roll back to Call of Duty 4 Pro Mod and look at the animations, the models on those characters. They were so cool back then. I still go back and feel like the way those characters were made were better, which is just, obviously that's maybe a little bit nostalgia. But for me, the improvement is just not there to justify the damage these games, or this game specifically, does to your PC. It's ridiculous.
Look, this is where I have to give Nintendo some credit, because they've never really been guys to push the hardware envelope. And some of their games, even, Melee, which looks phenomenal for a 20-year-old game, and their gameplay is what stands the test of time. So, again, it goes back to those gameplay loops and these products that are so good that you almost have to play it. And the companies that are milking us by releasing a new version of the game each year that just causes you to have higher and higher hardware requirements to play essentially the same thing.
Yeah. No, and I mean, looking at, touching on something like WoW, again, it's not a WoW podcast, but it serves the point. Now, obviously, this new mount that was just dropped in the store that everyone's just losing their minds about. Obviously, it's like looking at where's the importance, in terms of how and what they develop for the game, in terms of content-wise. We roll back to launch and how the 3 days of earlier game time was more valuable than the game itself. So where is the prioritization on the product? Is it really on the game itself, or is it on all the little attachments that they can slap on to make us spend more money? And I think the funny point you made up is that they seem so unplanned that you can go to some other website, most probably buy gold on that website, redeem that in the game and purchase the mount for a cheaper price. I just feel like they're not thinking about what they're doing.
Look, I mean, they're making so much money off this. It's like I think it was Pirate Software that said the first in-store mount in WoW made more money than the entirety of StarCraft 2. So, I mean, if you're looking at it from a business owner or a corporate point of view, it's like, okay, well,
course.
I can get 4 developers to do a week's worth of work, and it's going to make more money than the $100 million we spent developing StarCraft 2. That's an easy choice for them. And it's onto the consumers to a large extent that enable this. You know, the only power you as a consumer have
buying
is
mounts
with your wallet.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, if you stop buying a product from a company, they are forced to adapt if they want to hit the sales that they want to.
Yeah, and now touching on that is actually a perfect segue into this other MMO that we've been playing. A little bit on my end, more so with our homie Dane, Old Pesky, and Creever. They've been heavily invested into Throne and Liberty. So another game that's popped out recently. Obviously, there's some very strong pay-to-win elements in that game. If you're willing to throw the cash at it, you could have a fully geared character by the end of the afternoon. You know, you could be completely sorted. But then on the other side, if you're willing to dedicate your time, daily grinding, the limitations that they put on you, I think that's just kind of law that's come in from like the side of Korea and China. A lot in their games, they almost force you to stop playing in some way to control time. But within that time you have been given, you can farm up enough currency that is same value as the paid currency to actually buy all these cosmetics. So, for example, Dane and Creeves, they've been getting the battle passes, getting the cosmetics they want purely off of grinding specific content in the game and selling it to people who value their time more than their money, and they're willing to just buy those items to the point where you can buy stats to put onto your weapon in the crafting process. So someone like Shroud, he explained how he can literally pay to win $120 and he can kind of have his character almost fully geared, you know. But at least they give you the option of grinding it out. So maybe there is that kind of middle ground, finding a way to make it work in that sense where you have the economy of some that are willing to play to attain and some are willing to buy to attain. But it's gotten to the point where something like World of Warcraft, they just lock a cosmetic to a cash purchase, and they spend so much time and effort on that the game itself feels like it's been left behind. Like you kept on going on about how every second day the balancing has changed, and now suddenly you were used to something, they figured it was broken, they'll go and fix it, and end up breaking something else. It just feels like the effort in pre-patch to fix everything and figure out what wasn't working, they did nothing.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because, I mean, I do like it when a developer is spending time and effort to adjust the game to make it better. It is a bit of a yo-yo at the moment with WoW, which is unfortunate. But then you look at a game like Smash Bros. Melee, where the game's been out for 20 years, people are still figuring out new things, new characters are winning tournaments, which is kind of wild, which also, I just wish they would allow things to settle a little bit more before they go and make these knee-jerk changes. And also, you know, if your class is one of the specs that gets nerfed quite heavily, you've just spent, you know, 3-4 days playing time getting this character into a competitive state, and essentially now it's an immense struggle. So, yeah, look, I'm not an expert on this. It is a frustrating issue, and I think that's also why, you know, these non-competitive games, these couch co-op games, you know, like, I mean, one of the games we still need to do a playthrough of is Baldur's Gate.
Yes. Got to touch on that.
Is fantastic. And I think one of the big goals for me with this is to find games that I can play with my family, you know, eventually with my sons, and that aren't stuck in that, that isn't stuck in that addictive gaming loop.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel that if you're constantly doing new stuff in your gaming, it's a net positive. If you're just stuck doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, you know, let's be honest, it's not good. It doesn't help you grow as a gamer. It doesn't necessarily improve you unless, you know, you've got the specific goal to grind a ranking or an achievement in a competitive game that you really like. But there's a difference, because then you need to be looking at your recorded gameplay to see where you can improve. You need to go and put in the hours in the lab. You know, there's a whole different process versus just getting on playing Dota for 2-3 hours a night and always being stuck in the same ranking. Now, look, if you're playing it just from a purely relaxation point of view, you know, like watching an anime or whatever, that's cool. But again, you know, when you're watching an anime or a show or a movie, at least you're consuming a story and you're moving on to the next thing. So a big part for me is to not get stuck in those gaming loops.
100%. And again, I think diving onto that Baldur's Gate 3 point before we move on too far, I think we can take that into the discussion that we want to have with, you know, the game awards that are coming up, and kind of where are we sitting now with games? Where have we come from with games? And where do we want to see the industry go with regards to the content that we're consuming? Looking at Baldur's Gate, obviously, as you said, again, we'd love to play something that we'd love to do in a co-op scenario. So the fun one, I think it could be pretty fun, bro. It's like the boys and the wives do a run through together. I think that could get pretty wild. I could see some arguments coming in along the way there. Some good content for sure. But the big issue, as you said, there is time. So Baldur's Gate 3, incredible game, wins all the awards, so much content to dive into. How do we possibly digest that when the last 2 to 3 months we've had like 7 to 8 AAAs, ones that are coming as well that we yearn to play? It's so difficult to consume all this content within, you know, a short period of time. So I think that's where, to your point, the single player kind of linear RPG becomes more valuable, because you can space that out, play them, you know, whenever you want to, unless you're doing it for content, then you need to be playing the new game as it launches. But yeah, from your perspective, how do you, I guess, manage the amount of consumption when it comes to the games, and how do you prioritize what you play, I guess?
So I think that's going to be different for each person. For me, it really comes down to spending time with friends. I think as you get older, it's harder and harder to, you know, make time to go and do things. And the convenience of being able to just hop onto your computer and be in a lobby with your friends is extremely appealing for a lot of people. But then, you know, the habit that I've found myself getting into with my friends is like we essentially playing the same game on repeat for a while until we move to the next game. Where, you know, it's like playing Sunday football or action cricket or whatever it is that you may or may not do with your friends over weekends. It takes effort to organize those things, and the payoff is almost always worth it. So a big thing for me is to spend more time into organizing those gaming groups, those sessions where, you know, yeah, the first maybe 4 or 5 hours isn't going to be as fun as hopping into that game of card. But once you're into the flow of, say, you know, a game like Baldur's Gate, then it's something that you very much look forward to, almost like, you know, a new episode of your favorite series releasing. And a big thing for me is to identify those games, find them, play them, give you guys feedback and a you know, balanced opinion on whether or not it's worth your time.
Yeah, and I think that's leading back to the point of like, we're playing single player games, obviously enjoy that story, but then the multiplayer side of things comes out where what we miss, I think, in the games of today is that social experiment that made something like WoW so popular back in the day, where you were kind of, it was almost impossible to progress unless you were in a group or in a larger guild to attack these challenges. And you had kind of a relationship and an almost kind of, if you want to call it a day-to-day scenario of things happening when you'd log onto your server. You know that this damn orc hanging out in Goldshire is always, you know, harassing new players, and you're going to go there with your homies and kill him this afternoon. And there's like this funny story that kind of gets formed on your server. And that's something I think that's been missing on WoW because of what we touched on. You play for the first couple of weeks with your homies, but then from there, you all just split into your auto group finders, whether it be for battlegrounds or PvPs, arenas, solo blitzes. You're doing mythics with randoms, and you're kind of just playing an RPG again. You're not really playing with your friends. So it loses that element of it being a multiplayer game for me. A lot of the time, I'm like, there's 4 other NPCs. 2 of them are doing damage. One's tanking, one's healing, and we're just attacking a dungeon. You could be in a delve, to be honest. It's the same thing. You're not really playing with your homies anymore. So rather just play an RPG and focus on those games that really stimulate the social experience in a multiplayer sense, you know. So looking at the next few months ahead and the type of content we want to create, Dre and I obviously are eyeing out the Game of the Year awards. We obviously have the nominations coming out next month in November, and then the final celebration happening in December. So Dre will dive into a little bit more, but what we want to do is obviously be here when those nominations come out, take those games as a Tryhard group, play through as many of them as we can, and then come back for our final episode, well, not the final episode, but the episode before the Game of the Year awards with our homie James, who has his own opinion about games, his own experience about games, and then give you guys a little bit of feedback on our experience, and then obviously compare the Tryhard tier list to the final tier list.
Yeah, so we want to tackle all the games on the list of the nominations and then do our predictions and see how close or far off we are. And also, we're not going to always agree with every award, but we'll give you our game of the years for each category. And, I think it's going to be an interesting and fun challenge for us to actually just go play some of these games where in the past, I probably wouldn't have played some of them.
Exactly. I think what I was thinking about even while we were chatting is we're obviously disappointed and also stoked with certain gaming experiences this year. But if you really think about it, we have missed out on a lot of the games, So there might be little gems out there hiding that actually fill those gaps for us and make the experience better when we go to the games that we're kind of playing on repeat. So it's a whole cool exercise that I'm really excited for. Obviously, looking at some indies, some, as you said, games that we might not have even remotely touched that are very, very story focused. I think we're touching on that point of like we're kind of addicted to that kind of specific like gameplay loop. Here I am 20 years later still running around in TDM and Call of Duty, and I can do that all afternoon. By the end of the day I'm like frustrated, like dealing with just these kill and death loops. Sometimes it's like, dude, you could have actually gone and chilled and played this other game, have an amazing experience, get attached to a character, have a cool story that you can share with your friends and your partner. Instead you're just like, just angry with Call of Duty.
I mean there's such a massive selection of good games that are still on the list of to play games, like Tales of Arise, Hi-Fi Rush, Nier Automata, all these games that are extremely good both in gameplay and in story, and yet I find myself not getting to them. So I really think it's going to be interesting to compare notes, because obviously we can't play all the games each, but between the two of us I think we'll be able to cover quite a vast selection of the games, both on Game of the Year and things that have been on the back burner.
Yes, and I think with that, we're going to be very excited to obviously present that to you guys and actually get your input on that as well. So when the nominations come out and we actually give you guys our little tier list before the big day, I think we'd love a little bit of a back and forth with you homies in the comments, obviously, and we can formulate almost like a combined final tier list of what Dre and I think, but then also one with what you guys think. And on that final day, when the Game Awards are live, we'll be here together, live on stream, obviously reacting to the news, and hopefully we hit the number on the head there with a few of them, yeah?
Yeah, no, 100%. And then
hopefully we can actually trust our critique here on games. Otherwise, we'll end the show there.
What's that guy on Rotten Tomatoes that always rates the movies like the exact opposite of everyone? I think it's Raymond White or something like that, where everyone will be like, this is a great movie, and then it'll be like, it sucks. And then we're like talking about movies like Inception and stuff like that. He just does it to watch the world burn. So yeah, no, maybe we're a bunch of Raymond Whites here, but that leads us on to the next upcoming big thing, which is Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, Halloween coming up on the tomorrow.
Lastminute.com.
Yeah, so I mean, tomorrow, fair enough, we'll be live for Halloween, playing through Silent Hill 2. So I'm super excited about that. A game, again, touching back on that little story of watching my brother play games. That was one of them, the original Silent Hill 2.
Does it release tomorrow?
No, it's been out actually throughout October. So I'm a little bit slow, but I just kept it for Halloween for the stream. We'll be live for 24 hours, obviously playing a little bit of that, a little bit of Black Ops 6 Zombies as well. We were playing that a little bit the other night. That's always something that's cool with Black Ops. Treyarch, they always release their games with a little bit of zombies on the side, and it looks like this one gets a little bit deeper than the ones in the past too. So we'll explore that a little bit on stream tomorrow, a little bit of Silent Hill 2, and I think that kind of is going to be a part of our review for the end of the year, because it'll definitely be included into the nominations this year. My guess it would be October. That's early enough, right?
For the nominations?
Yeah.
I think it's mid-November.
I mean, it's not too late, right? For Silent Hill 2, it should be included, right?
Yes. No, look, I mean, this is something that we'll figure out very soon.
We'll figure it out, yeah. At least we'll have gone through Silent Hill 2. You can go through it with us on stream. Dre will be in chat for sure, interacting with you guys and playing some zombies as well. But then it's the big month of November, waiting for those Game of the Year nominations. And then we begin the hard grind of playing through all those games. So we'll be back, obviously. This episode comes out, what's this now? Wednesday, the 30th of October. We'll have our next episode coming out, not next week, the week after.
That should be pretty much right when the nominations are.
So looking forward to that one, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's about it for this episode. I do think one of the things that we'd love to hear from you guys is with the Game of the Year nominations, which we'll do next time, whether or not we sort of cover the games individually in separate videos, whether you want an overview for genres, because besides the podcast, we're also looking into doing other types of videos. So whether it's just straight up reviews, whether it is hardware peripheral reviews, I really like my gear. We really open to the suggestions, and I think one of the things that is unique to what we can bring to the table is just also how accessible these things and the costing of stuff in South Africa, because traditionally gaming has been quite a big barrier for a lot of people locally, just because of how expensive hardware is. And obviously we're both big PlayStation fanboys, so that is for most people the easiest point of entry, because gaming PCs have gotten so expensive. We open for any ideas and feedback, and looking forward to bringing you plenty of content in the future.
2025 is going to be a try-hard year, soldiers. So awesome. We'll see you guys for the next one. Drop those comments, obviously, what you enjoyed from today. Obviously, some games that you might be excited for with regards to the nominations for Game of the Year. Some highlights on your end that we can try out maybe even before the time. Kill some time now before the time arises. But guys, thank you very much, soldiers. We'll see you for the next one. Dre, appreciate your time in our new location, all sunny here in Durbanville, South Africa. We love to obviously be here with you guys on the, as I always joke, the last stop before Antarctica. So when it comes to our online gaming experience, it gets a bit tricky, but at least you can get the perspective from us all the way here on the true deep south. Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it at that. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, homies. Awesome. Cheers, bro. Yes, yeah, I'm sweating. It's getting hot there.
Yeah.